Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Gold Goats and Guns half hour or so here on YouTube. My name is Tom Luongo. I hope you've all having a good day. I have a cup of coffee. We've got a pending dollar crisis coming. Geopolitical unrest everywhere. It's Tuesday. Welcome. All right. So let's get started and talk about what's going on today. Yesterday was a big day. The American embassy opened in Jerusalem amidst horrific violence at the border with Gaza. I'm not going to go into who's right and who's wrong. Kind of laid that out last night. As a libertarian and a staunch individualist, I decry all forms of state violence, including the border fence itself. I just see it as inevitable. You have two groups of people that despise each other the way these two do. Violence is inevitable, especially, and any kind of hardline stance taken by one is going to get violence in the other, and then back and forth. Either one group is dead or they're separated. The latter is impossible. So, math. All right. I've got a new blog up on my post up on my blog over at goldgoatsandguns.com entitled, along with the title of this live stream, Trump should be thanking Iran, not Israel. And I'm going to explain some of that now. I went over it last night in a rant last night on Periscope, which frankly got almost out of control because I couldn't take the reflexively pro-Trump and Israel line any farther. I didn't believe that it was productive to make that continue along that type of analysis. That's my main point of frustration, and I'm trying to elucidate that position today and in conversation. So if you have any questions, put them in the chat. If you say hi, put them in the chat. I'm open to responding as long here. What's important is that yesterday I was on Radio Sputnik with Lee Stranahan and Garland Nixon, and we were discussing my article from last week about the link between the Trump pulling out of the JCPOA, or the Iran nuclear deal, and the potential for him having touched off a global debt crisis. And it's and that idea is based solely on the idea that we've now reached the bottom of and the reversal in the US dollar markets, which were overextended to the downside, the weak side, and now are going to snap back to the opposite direction, given the fragility of global capital markets, especially emerging market debt markets and European sovereign debt markets. That any amount of dollar strength here could be fatal to the global. Now, if you've been following my work for any length of time at all, you'll know that I've been talking about this for a long time, saying that we're reaching the event horizon for the next global financial crisis. Fed's willingness to put off raising rates by over a year after the taper tantrum of 2013 and 2014 helped forestall the sovereign debt crisis for another couple of years. It extended the gold bear market another couple of years. All of these things could have come to fruition in 2016 had the Fed started raising interest. But it also takes a political climate of extreme uncertainty. We have it here in the United States with the ongoing soft coup against the sitting president. Angry with him on foreign policy, but he's president. And that soft coup is creating uncertainty at the top of the United States political system, forcing Trump to make bad decisions, both economically and on foreign policy. It's creating havoc in Europe. It's creating havoc in the Middle East. It's creating havoc in emerging markets, hampering his ability to create strong relationships with both China and Russia, even hampering his ability to see clearly the potential solution for the problems in Syria, which he inherited from his predecessor, Obama, and that he rightly saw as a policy that needed ended. Problem with all of this is, up until about 6 weeks ago, pretty much on board with what he was doing and how he was going about it, and that there still looked to me to be enough dialogue between him and Putin and him and Xi Jinping and China that there was a potential grand bargain in the Middle East, which was all only predicated on his desire to pull the troops out of Syria. And the minute he made that threat, everything changed. And within days, a dramatic reversal in policy and personnel in Washington. And we're now living with some very ugly consequences. So before I get into the market stuff, I want to make sure that you understand the background of this. And when I say that Trump should be thankful to Iran as opposed to Israel, I mean that in this context. Trump is angry about the Iran nuclear deal. He thinks it's a bad deal. He thinks it gave money to evil Iranians who sponsor terrorism around the world. Fine. That's a partial truth and a partial lie. Iranians are not in any shape or form. Do they have their hands clean? They're not pristine actors. Nobody in this scenario, nobody in the Middle East is the good guy. Anybody follows President Trump, anybody who is sanctioning or making excuses this morning for his behavior and his policy has lost sight of the fact that even he isn't the good guy anymore. But unfortunately, we've become so radicalized thanks to this deep state opposition to the presidency that so many people reflexively want to defend him because he's attacked on all sides. So therefore, everything Trump does is good. And anybody who complains to the other side, on the other side, they must be bad. So that if George Soros is against getting rid of the Iran nuclear deal, it must be a good thing. Getting rid of it must be a good thing. That's not necessarily true. For things like the TPP, sure. The TTIP, sure. NAFTA, sure. Paris Accord, sure. Those were pillars of a transnational superstate. They were pillars. They were treaties or agreements between heads of state that would cripple sovereignty of all of its signees. Most notably the United States, because that's the only country I truly care about. That's where I live. But I care about everybody else as well. Just not as much. But the Iran nuclear deal is a thornier problem. Because what Trump is most angry about, and he's made it abundantly clear, is that Iran needs to no longer have access to any capital to do any bad stuff around the world. Well, there's a problem with that theory. Because when Iran was given the money back from the nuclear deal, the first thing they did was spend it on stabilizing the Assad regime and kicking out ISIS in Syria. So here's Trump on the one hand saying, we need to kick the hell out of ISIS. It's a good idea. Salafists head-chopping animals need to be exterminated. But they were empowered by Obama and Clinton and Soros and the rest of them who created the policy in Syria and fomented the civil war. They also, by the way, overthrew Libya. And they created the Arab Spring all the way around the Middle East, all the way around North Africa and the Middle East. All going on. It was all a product of the Clinton State Department. Benghazi, our people in Benghazi, Christopher Stevens and 3 other people were killed because they found out that Hillary was running guns into Syria through the Benghazi embassy. Trump knows all this. So this policy to atomize Syria and turn it into a failed state, which he disagreed with when it was going on, when it was being prosecuted, and when he wasn't president, he was tweeting against it. Don't, Mr. Obama, don't go into Syria, don't invade. He's now bending over backwards to figure out ways to keep it going for as long as possible because Bibi Netanyahu wants him to do so. Which is it, Mr. President? What do you want? Because all I hear is you decrying the actions of Russia and Iran for their actions in Syria, while you take all the credit for kicking the hell out of ISIS, which you didn't actually do. They're the ones who did all the work. Yeah, sure, you got ISIS out of Raqqa, and you let half of them escape to Afghanistan and Iraq. And then got mad at the Russians for bombing the convoy afterwards. Again, these are the bad guys. Now, am I willing to admit that Iran is in Syria not just to get rid of ISIS? Of course. They're there for other reasons. They're there to resupply Hezbollah. They're there to put pressure on Israel. Of course. But that presence can be temporary. That presence doesn't have to remain there. And everybody knows it. Everybody who's important in this situation, everybody who's a party to these talks knows it. But truth be told, Mr. President, that those billions of dollars that Iran got back, they spent in Syria, stopping the policy of destroying Syria and which created the refugee crisis into Europe. They're angry about the refugees that have been, the refugees coming out of Syria and northern Africa, and and Obama was bringing them here. You've stopped that policy dead cold. But all of that pressure came from where? It came from the cauldron that was put in place under Obama. And Syria was the linchpin, was the jewel in that, the crowning achievement in that policy. User 13 reminds me that they got them out of Raqqa by making it look like Dresden. Exactly. They bombed it back to the Stone Ages, people. They didn't use advanced urban fighting techniques like the Iranians, the Syrians, and Hezbollah did in Aleppo or Deir ez-Zor, because these are truly the best urban fighters on the planet now, and block-to-block, street-to-street fighting. Today, right before coming on, the AP is reporting that Trump just designated the head of the Iranian central bank to be a terrorist. He can be sanctioned directly. Now, the Iranian central bank can be targeted directly because, quote, the Iranians supply Hezbollah. So now the sitting government in Lebanon is also a terrorist organization. Does that mean that we have the right to bomb with impunity in Lebanon? These are the consequences. When you start making these definitions, this is what happens. So at the end of the day, Trump should be thanking Iran for doing his work for him, for taking the money that Obama gave them and then using it against Obama. Unless, of course, all of that talk about how Syria is a mess and we shouldn't be involved in that, unless all of that was all bullshit, and what Trump's real position was the entire time was kick the hell out of ISIS, but also get rid of Assad and everybody else and make the world safe for Israel. That's exactly what it looks like. I'm wrong. At the same time, the deep state has now radicalized his base to the point where they're willing to go along with whatever crazy-ass freaking scheme he wants. Whatever John Bolton, certified crazy person, John Bolton, who shouldn't be allowed near crayons. no less policy statements, has multiple plans with which to tame Iran. Most of which are 20 years out of date. There's a solution here. I've been talking about it for over a year. It involves the United States finally coming to grips with the situation in Syria and getting out. But that's not going to happen. What Trump now wants to do is to create multiple Arab militias to take over in the places that we have that our guys have secured, and to take over all the bases, that we've created all over Syria, and then give those bases over to the Saudis, who are spending going to spend $100 billion on our weapon system. These are people who can't even fight Houthi rebels and starving Houthi rebels in friggin' Yemen, and you expect them to take on the Syrian Arab army, along with Russia and Iran and IRGC forces Iran. What? You think they're going to train a whole bunch of Kurds in northern Syria? You see how quickly Erdogan and Turkey put the kibosh on that. User 13 asks, do we think Bolton is going to try to sabotage the Korean talks the way he sabotaged the six-party talks 8 years ago? Yes. I don't have a link to it in the description of the video below, but there's the latest post on moonofalabama.org that you should check out. If I can find it, and I'll post it in the chat. He talks about this explicitly this morning. Wow. It was such a big day. That's actually the fourth post down at MOA. For those of you who watch the replay, that link is now in the chat. So, yeah. So now what? Well, if you guys have been watching what I've been talking about, I told you a couple weeks ago that when the U.S. Treasury market reached a breaking point, 10-year bond hitting the technical breakout point of 3.05%. And I'm going to start prepping to show you my desktop in just a minute so we can talk about this directly. I don't know if you remember me talking about that. That was very important. That line was very important, 3.05%. And then after that, of course, once we reach that point, markets tend to take those big, huge technical resistance points, and they never break through them on the first. Almost never, especially something as important as a technical breakout or a signal that we're looking at the beginnings of a new bear market in something as important as the U.S. 10-year Treasury bond. It's only one of the 2 or 3 most important markets in the entire world. Technical resistance doesn't get broken, willy-nilly. It usually takes at least 1 attempt, usually 2 or 3 attempts. It takes at least 2 attempts, if not 3 attempts, or 4. So where are we today? Bring up the desktop. Big. What's the yield on the 10-year bond right now? 3.076%. Bring up a daily chart. Show it to you. Look at that huge breakout today. This is all in 2 days since the Italians held coalition talks where the 2 opposition parties, Five Star Movement and the League, got together and are forming a government. And the worst of this move and the moves in both the euro and the Italian bond markets happened after the news hit that they should have a government agreement put together in the next couple of days. So now the markets are finally saying, uh-oh. So we take a look at the weekly chart. We can see that this 3.05% level has been, this level above 3% has been challenged a couple of times, but no, rates are definitely moving higher. And I'll show you what I'm talking about in the long-term technical breakout. Here's the high from December of 2013. 10-year yield is now trading at a 5-year high. Bad. And this is bad in that it's the same thing as what I was talking about with Garland and Stranahan yesterday, that once we start to get this, we start to get a runaway market in the dollar. Notice the dollar index is only up to 93. It's only 3 or 4 points off of its bottom at 89, right? It was at 115. It hit a high of 110 last year. And this is what's happening to yields. That's putting pressure on the euro, which is now down, which lost over a point today. It was actually trading yesterday around this time at almost $1.20. Now it's $1.18.4. Ignore these numbers because they're not accurate. The amount that it's moved on a daily basis, that's not accurate. So what's important here is to note that we had a major move this morning. We opened at 2.95% on the 10-year bond, and it's moved 11 basis points. That's enormous. It's also done so, but it's done so while widening the yield curve, which had gotten compressed down to 0.40. The 210 spread, which got compressed down to 45 basis points, is also incredibly tight. So a natural expansion of the yield curve here. Expect the 2-year bond to catch up at some point in the near future. What did that do? Well, it crushed the euro. It crushed the British pound, which very recently was trading at $1.45. Now it's trading at $1.35 because it looks like hard Brexit is going to happen, maybe. The Japanese yen is back to $1.10, or back to 110. The Canadian dollar is at $1.29. So there you go. Now, and then the piece de resistance. This is all happening at the same time that silver backed off, is now off 36 cents, and gold is down $27 on a technical breakdown below 1,300 for the first time this year. If not longer. Yes. At the first time, yeah. It's been quite a while since we saw gold below $1,300 an ounce. We opened January above 1,300. So first time this year, we're below 1,300 in gold. You can see where the support was on the chart. All right here, these lows right here, right around $1,300. Boom, gone. 1305, 1310. Terrible drop. We've got to. We're off in the Bitcoin markets as well. This is all telling you that dollar liquidity is drying up. Exactly what I told you. Now I'm going to go show you the Italian 5-year bond. Right? Notice here, this is the daily chart of the Italian 5-year bond since the election back on March 4th, which this area here is when the election took place. You can see how high the Italian 5-year bond got. You can see how much of it, the ECB then came in and bought a bunch of Italian debt. The markets, while there was a lull in the coalition talks, weren't sure what they were going to do, and it looked like they might be able to scrape something out. ECB was able to push Italian bond yields lower, and then as coalition talks broke down, boom, breakout. Go here, look at the weekly chart, boom, breakout. This was this was a couple weeks before the election. Then the election happened, and the ECB came in and suppressed the price, or bought and dropped the price and suppressed the yield. Now it's rising higher. Anybody want to tell me that you think it's reasonable in any way, manner, shape, or form that Italian debt, 5-year debt, should be trading at 2.2% lower than U.S. debt of the same maturity? Bueller, Fry, really? I'm sorry. I'm not sure what's going on either. Gotta be a bad. It might be that I've got bad weather up here and I'm getting pretty spotty internet service. So I'm doing the best I can. So the wider these spreads get, the more they have to compress, and the higher they're gonna push yields. So I'm gonna pull me back up real quick. Back to that. So what's going on here is that we're starting to see the beginnings of the dollar the dollar rising, not even quickly, and it's causing major stresses in the marketplace, causing major breakdowns across markets. And when we start to see this kind of movement, it's going to accelerate out of control. And it'll start to accelerate. And the hope here is that it doesn't accelerate too quickly. But guys, I got news for you. We've been waiting for this for an awfully long time. I expect it to get worse before it gets better. I've been handicapping all year that there would be a breakdown in gold on a dollar liquidity spasm. Well, here's today. Gold's off $30. Euro's off today a full penny. Yesterday, the euro was up and Italian bond yields. So since yesterday morning, European debt in general across the board has been getting sold. Yesterday, they sold and they converted into euros. They went to cash. Today, they're converting euros. They're still selling debt and they're converting euros quicker than that into dollars. So they're selling the euro in order to raise dollars because they have a lot of debt has to be dealt with. Now we're getting margin calls on interest rate swaps. We're getting guys covering their dollar hedges, their euro hedges. Okay, this is what's going on. I had a great article here from a couple of days ago that I found. I'm going to post it up in the chat as well from ETF Daily. About how expensive it is to hedge the dollar at this point. Dollar hedging is getting more expensive. Great article, a little technical for the layman, but still a good article to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. That once hedging costs start to rise, once hedging costs start to rise, it's going to continue to push yields up. So it's not going to push yields down. It's going to fuel an even greater surge in the dollar as the people can't hedge their dollar bets. They're going to have to just hold dollars as opposed to hedging them. It's really important. And I think the point of that article is that, as the Fed unwinds its balance sheet, that what's happening is that we're getting a decrease in dollar liquidity in the markets around the world. And Trump's throwing a stink bomb into the geopolitical order over the Iran nuclear deal and the aggressive push for sanctions and trade war all at the same time, lashing out in every direction imaginable, trying to make sure that Europe stays on the bandwagon and does what they're told. And China doesn't protest too much, and the Russians stay beaten down, and everything else. And all of these things keep happening. Yeah, and all these things keep happening, and in order to achieve a goal that won't necessarily get him what he wants, because here's the $64,000 answer. Ready? Not question, but answer. If the mullahs are overthrown in Iran, what's the likely outcome? Well, you've been following my Periscopes and you've been following my work, I'll tell you that I've been talking to multiple Iranians over the course of the last couple of years from different parts of the world, that have told me all the same thing, and that's that it'll be Hassan Soleimani, the head of the IRGC Quds force, who has the backing of the people, and probably a coalition between him and President Rouhani. I got news for you. These guys are going to be just as hardline against Iran and against Israel and the U.S. as the mullahs are, as Khomeini is. It's not going to change anything. It's going to be a secular government that hates the both. So what Trump is doing here is he's using his incredibly good powers of persuasion to radicalize his base for a position that he didn't campaign on and is not in America's best interest, because it's going to embroil us in a global trade war, which is ultimately going to cause a sovereign debt crisis that is ultimately going to destroy the dollar. Not in the short term. The short term, it's all going to be about winning, and I'm getting tired of winning, because as the dollar rises, it's going to be good for us to invest overseas. It's going to be good for a variety of things. he needs to take a harder line on Israel, but he's not going to do so. Alistair Crook's latest article over Strategic Culture Foundation, a subscriber to my newsletter, by the way, over at Gold, Goats, and Guns. Let me see if I can find that article. Got it linked in my article. It's linked in my article that I published today. But that article makes it clear that having talked to people close to the situation in the Israeli Defense Forces, that looking at the White House and the office of the Prime Minister in Israel, it's really tell that there's any air between them. It's like you couldn't slip a credit card between Trump and Netanyahu at this point. They're so in lockstep with what's going on, and it doesn't really matter who's in charge because they both are in cahoots, are in lockstep on this. And John Bolton was brought in to do the work. So now what? Now I've been talking to people. I'm getting it from everybody from every side, thinking, well, Iran is really vulnerable right now to a regime change operation because there were those protests earlier in the year. I'm like, no, they're not. You're going to see a lot of press about this. You're going to see a lot of push from American and European media on this. It's going to make everything look like there's an incipient revolt in Iran the minute all these things go out. These sanctions go into place and everything takes place. You're going to see all of this. Just like you're going to see fake Iranians in your Twitter account telling you that thank you, President Trump, for taking a hard line stance against our evil government and all this shit. That's all psyop, guys. None of that is real, or most of it is not. So you're going to see a tremendous amount of this, and it's only going to get worse. So take none of this as a fundamental criticism of Israel's right to survival or this. None of that matters. This is not me being an anti-Semite. It's not me being not understanding their strategic vulnerabilities. I understand why they're acting this way. I disagree with what they're doing and why they're acting this way. It's just that simple. Not that I don't understand that Israel's in a position that Israel could easily be overrun by all the crazy Arabs in the region. I understand that. I understand. Halsey and I have been arguing. Halsey English and I have been discussing this quite dispassionately for over a year now. But there's no grand bargain on the table if Netanyahu wants Iran isolated from the entire world and unable to prosecute domestic or foreign policy. It's insane. And as far as I'm concerned, he is truly the most dangerous man on the planet right now. And he needs to be stopped. Because the truth is that Vladimir Putin and Chinese can keep Iran bottled up. That's true. It's that simple. And the fact that we're sitting here continuing to back both them and the Saudis, who are truly the villains in this scenario. I've been saying I'm perfectly willing to see Israel as kind of caught in the middle and just doing its best to manipulate whatever grand powers it can in order to maintain its survivability. I get that. The Saudis are under true, honest to God, existential threat. That's why the planes are in the air in Yemen. That's why they're lashing out in every direction. That's why they're spending. That's why they're trying to bribe Trump with hundreds of billions in arms sales and all of this, because they understand the problem. They understand what their fiscal position is. They understand that they need to sell have a successful IPO of 20% of Aramco. They understand all of that to raise enough capital to be able to remake their society. Otherwise, they're going to get lynched at the first sign of weakness. It's a good question. User 13 asks, why do we assume a country with nukes is under such threat? Why would the Arabs attack a nation capable of reducing their own to radioactive rubble? Because once the nukes start flying, the nukes start flying. And Israel can't nuke Lebanon. Okay? Really, they can't nuke Syria. They can nuke Iran because it's far enough away. And that's why Netanyahu is so adamant about creating as big a buffer zone as possible, because he wants to have a big enough buffer zone that he can freely nuke whoever he feels threatened by without there being any blowback on Israelis. So if he has to, he'll get everybody else to fight his battles for him. That makes sense strategically and tactically? I'm sorry. This man is a danger. He was wrong about Iraq. He was wrong about Syria. He's going to be wrong about Iran. I mean, as I was talking with a friend of mine literally about an hour ago, and we were talking about all of these things. He's far more convinced that Iran is teetering on the edge of revolution than I am. And I'm saying, I'm laying this out for him going, just because we're acting this way, you don't think that the Iranians, the Chinese and the Russians haven't game planned all of this already? Do you really think that you're just kind of sitting back going, what's this crazy Trump guy gonna do? They know he's not pulling the frickin' strings. They know who's pulling the strings, and they know exactly how that guy operates. They know what's going on in Saudi Arabia. They know that China knows that it pulls the strings on Saudi Arabia's economy at this point. The Chinese stop buying Saudi oil, and the Iranians keep putting oil contracts up on the Shanghai exchange denominated in yuan for Chinese companies to go buy directly without ever having to go through the dollar. Steal 15 or 20% of the Saudis' market share in oil. Why do you think we're trying to put such draconian economic pressure on Iran? Because if we don't, then they've got their outs. I mean, we've all talked about this petro-yuan contract in terms of gold convertibility and what does that mean long term and all this stuff. Hey, how about the basic shit? Iran can sell its oil on the open market and there's not enough fucking thing we can do to stop it. Japanese, Koreans, anybody can go buy Iranian oil on the Shanghai exchange. There's nothing we can do to stop it. You're not going to slow down Iranian oil production by putting sanctions on them. Oh, sure, some Europeans won't buy the oil. Chinese will just turn around and stop buying a few 100,000 barrels from the Saudis and buy them from Iran and have Iran ship it all to them. I mean, what's the problem? I mean, there's grades of oil, whatever the refineries are set up for, and yada, yada, yada. But for the most part, they're all selling close to the same grade of oil. It's all mostly a medium. They're all selling basically medium sour blends. There's some Iranian light sour versus others, but whatever. At the end of the day, none of it's light sweet crude, or almost none of it's light sweet crude that gets sold to the Americans. So there's no overlap here between the United States and Iran in terms of economic activity. So there's no direct pressure that the United States can put on Iran. They can only put indirect pressure on through the financial market and through secondary sources by forcing Europe to not do business with them. And this is where I start to really put my thinking cap on. This is when I stop reacting to all of this stuff, and this is when I really step back and go, what's the big takeaway here? What's the big synthetic conclusion? Before I answer that question, I'm going to answer Green Penguin, who asks, isn't this all a good thing unless you're one of the psychos who wants to rule the world? You're absolutely right. Of course it's a good thing. So, what's the big synthetic conclusion? All of this stuff. Dollar implosion coming. Remember, the Chinese, by the way, the Chinese all follow Martin Armstrong. By the way, they do. Chinese central bank is staffed by guys who cut their teeth trading bonds and commodities in U.S. and European brokerage houses. Guys are not stupid. They're not ivory tower intellectuals. Never forget this. So, if they're convinced that a strong dollar wave is coming, maybe they're going to help it along. Maybe they're going to help precipitate the sovereign debt crisis that's coming. Maybe they're going to force Europe to finally get off its ass and make a decision about which side of the world it wants to embrace. Its natural trading partners with Russia, in Russia and the Middle East, or the United States, who treats it like a vassal state. So the Magapeds were all going winning when the Germans announced the other day that they were going to raise their military spending to 1.5% of GDP. I'm like, oh, don't get too happy about that. Germany and France want a grand army of the EU to be able to put down any internal rebellion. You know, just in case Spain's army isn't enough to put down a Catalonian independence movement. Think about it. The whole point of this is the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians are going to take the slings and arrows. They're going to invite this chaos. They're going to invite and allow the Americans and the Israelis to overextend themselves. A classic Russian cauldron. Make this part of the contact line weak. It breaks. You rush through. Then they come in and they surround you. Classic Russian cauldron. It's also, the other metaphor is that Putin is a judo master and he's just waiting for his opponent to get off balance a little bit and then bye-bye. And you reverse him and you throw him. Okay. You could probably make a good chess reference, but I'm not a good chess player. I understand martial arts. And I understand Russian military strategy. So, think about what they're going to do here. If you were there, wouldn't you do this? If you were fighting for the future of your country and your alliance and your world and the Belt and Road Initiative and the next generation of Russians and the next generation of Iranians, if you were thinking in those terms, you weren't just thinking about how you're going to get through the next election. If you weren't just thinking about how you were going to finish off some horseshit policy, that idea, and trying to make America great and trying to undo the Obama's legacy. If you're really thinking in terms of time horizons that are greater than the next 5 or 10 years, the next election cycle. Because that's the way the Russians are thinking. That's the way the Iranians are thinking. That's the way the Chinese are thinking. If they can break Europe here, if they can cleave any one of the major European countries, it could be Italy, it could be Germany, it could be France. Most likely it's going to be either Germany or Italy. Italy by leaving the European Union, or at least leaving the euro. Or Germany by finally saying enough is enough. We need the Nord Stream pipeline. Not only do we need Nord Stream 2, but as Dmitry Medvedev said the other day, you're probably going to need Nord Stream 3. Okay? Trump still thinks that he can overthrow Assad and put his people in place so that they can run oil pipelines into Europe. Turkey's pretty much done with that idea. Turk Stream's happening. The first leg of it is nearly finished, bringing Russian gas to Turkey. The Russians are in there. Rosatom is in there building them nuclear power plants. They're in they're in Iran building Iran nuclear power plants. The Chinese just finished the first rail line from Shanghai for Beijing all the way to Tehran. Done. I mean, it transverses a variety of existing railroads, but the whole link is there. Goods from Beijing can go directly to Tehran without ever getting on a ship. India is investing billions in a north-south rail line across Iran from the port at Chahabar. Okay? These things are all happening, and they're not going to stop tomorrow just because Orange Jesus has got his nose out of joint. Or because Bibi Netanyahu can't sleep at night. Get that fucker a plushie and turn the nightlight on. Tell him to go to sleep. Me, I'd give him a plushie of Ayatollah Khomeini, but that's just me. Because I'm an asshole. All right. Really just do stand-up. I'd probably make more money. All right. So that's where we are. That's the synthetic takeaway here. Watch to see how Iran, Russia, and China navigate all this. Because if the Iranian regime doesn't fall, if the mullahs don't fall within the first month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks of this, it's not going to work. If they do fall, we're not going to win anyway. This is a no-win. It literally is a no-win situation. Because Rouhani and Soleimani are not going to all of a sudden turn Iran into something that's not that's any different than it currently is, other than the theocracy. If you want to get rid of the mullahs, putting the sanctions back on them is not the way to do it. That's the way to ensure that they stay in power. Because no one likes being told by an outside power, you have to change. You're not good enough. The way you do business, the way you live your lives is bad. You're horrible people, and we're going to treat you badly. No one responds to that shit. Everybody responds to that with, you dude, I'm out of here. My country, right or wrong. I'll bitch about it all I want. I mean, to be honest with you, when I hear things like my friend was telling me today, and I think about what he's saying, it's like, wow, I'm hearing all these reports of protests and this and that, and how there's this real, honest to God, people are angry at the mullahs and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, fine. And you know something? If we were in Iran watching Iranian TV, I got news for you. Their TV and their press would say the American regime is not long for this life. Donald Trump barely has any control over his government, blah, 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 blah. When you flip the script, when you really stop to think about things from a perspective other than your own and other than what you think and what you want, you start coming to startlingly different conclusions about how strong one's own culture is. Trump's mistake has been framing Iran's position in the world as having gotten worse since he took power. What he should have done, the best thing for him to have done, was to have opened up diplomatic talks with Iran immediately and be the anti-Obama. Because the Obama administration was absolutely targeting Iran. They weren't empowering Iran. The whole purpose of the operation in Syria, one, it was directed by the Israelis and the Americans in the first place, was to destroy Syria, to isolate Iran, to promote Kurdish independence and uprisings all across Iraq and Turkey and Iran, while destroying Hezbollah. Trump had the opportunity to just go against the political grain here in the United States and open up diplomatic relations and diplomatic dialogue with both Putin and with Iran, regardless of the Mueller investigation, regardless of the screams of the Democrats and everybody else. Invite impeachment. He should have invited impeachment from these people. He should have not placated them. He should have not appeased them. He should have not been a pussy. Yeah, I said it. Donald Trump's been nothing but a pussy since he's been in power. Nixon went to China. Kim Jong-un is going to Singapore. All right, guys, it's 51 minutes in. Let's watch these markets and see. Now that we got daily closes above all of these ugly technical levels, and we've got a breakdown in gold and everything else, this to me looks like the beginning of a much bigger wave. It may not get hanky tomorrow or Thursday or or next week, but it's definitely the start of a new trend in the markets as it supports the changes in the geopolitics. And yes, user 13, you're absolutely correct. If Trump had gone to bat that way and he had told those people and he had done that, we would have gone to bat for him. And all these little pissant bureaucrats, all these friggin' obstructionary assholes like Rosenstein and Mueller and all these assholes working the system, I got news for you guys. They would have all been lynched. And they would have rolled over as opposed to dealing with what we're dealing with. Because if he had done it properly, there would have been a real march on Washington, and it would have been a real march by patriots on Washington and start lynching Congress. No, he played footsie with the very people he's trying to overthrow. Which makes me question his motives, and it questions his backbone. All right, I'm done for the afternoon. I'm going to be on with Halsey live tonight at 9:30. Going to discuss a lot of this stuff. Going to try and red pill Halsey on a lot of this stuff. We'll see what happens. You can follow my work over at goldgoatsandguns.com if you like what you heard today or any version of it today. You can support me by subscribing to the channel below and making sure that you turn notifications on so that you can join the discussion whenever I go live directly. You can find me on steemit at steemit/ at goldgoatsandguns, and you can support my work directly by signing up for my Patreon and subscribing to the Gold Goats and Guns investment newsletter, where I tie all of this up into a neat investment thesis to ride out the coming cataclysm in markets. It's just $12 a month. It's the best money you'll ever spend. You guys have a great afternoon, and we'll talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.